Picture this. You're 35, sitting in your car after a long day of work, staring at your phone. Your mother just texted. It's nothing urgent, just a question, maybe a complaint. But your chest tightens, your jaw clenches, and a pang of emotion pokes at your brain. You feel small again, like you're 10 years old, and nothing you do is ever enough. You tell yourself you're overreacting. It's fine. But that word, fine, is a mask. And underneath it, something screams in pain. Carl Jung spent decades working with the human psyche, and one discovery stood out as a common problem: the mother wound. Not from the woman who raised you, but the invisible force she carried, the archetype, the myth, the symbolic figure that shaped how you see love, safety, and yourself. In order to heal this wound, you must understand that the pain you carry wasn't fully hers to begin with. She inherited it, just like you did, and then gave it to you. And unless you face it, you'll pass it on too. Here's the truth. You didn't choose this baggage. You were a child. You adapted to survive. But now you're an adult, and those hidden bits within you are clawing at your heart. The emptiness, the perfectionism, the feeling that no matter what you achieve, it's never enough. These aren't character flaws. They're symptoms of a wound that runs deeper than memory. So, settle in for this short psychological journey. By the end of it, you'll understand how this wound forms, why it feels so impossible to escape, and one practice that can help start the process of healing. Let's start with what Jung called the archetypal foundation. Jung made a distinction that is crucial. Your personal mother and the mother archetype are not the same thing. The archetype is older than civilization, a pattern wired into the human psyche, representing concepts of life, nurturing, shelter, and death. Every culture has myths of the Great Mother, the one who gives life and the one who devours it. She's the garden and the grave. All humans carry this symbolic archetype within them. But when you're a child, you can't separate the two. Your mother becomes the entire world. If she's warm, you feel safe. If she's cold, you feel anxious. But here's where it gets complicated. Even if you had a loving mother, she still carries the weight of the archetype. You might see this archetype in your dreams as a witch, a dragon, or something suffocating. Those images aren't about her. They're about the psychic force she represents, the force that holds the power to give you everything and take it all away, the life binder. However, the mother wound is inflicted when the archetype gets contaminated by pain. Maybe your mother was overwhelmed, depressed, or critical. Maybe she needed you to be strong so she didn't have to fall apart. You learned that love was conditional, that you had to perform, achieve, or disappear to be safe. And because the archetype is so powerful, those lessons didn't just shape your relationship with her. They shaped your relationship with everyone, with yourself. Jung described this as a complex, an emotional knot embedded in your unconscious. You meet someone new, and suddenly you're anxious, people-pleasing, or shutting down. You don't know why. It feels automatic, like your nervous system is running an old program you didn't write. That's the mother complex speaking. It's not rational, it's not conscious, but it's running your life from the background. For sons, the wound often shows up in relationships with women. You might chase unavailable partners, recreate the dynamic where love has to be earned, or find yourself emotionally numb and unable to feel close to anyone because closeness once meant danger. For daughters, Jung outlined 4 patterns. You might become the caretaker, sacrificing everything to feel needed. Or you might swing the opposite way, rejecting anything soft, maternal, or vulnerable, because it reminds you of your mother. Some women lose themselves entirely, living through others like an empty vessel. Others resist so hard they become brittle, armored, avoidant, and afraid to need anyone. None of these are moral judgments. They're survival strategies. They worked when you were young. The problem is, you are an adult now, but they're still running, and they're exhausting you. But here's the truth Jung insisted on. The wound also holds the key. The same force that suffocates can heal. The same archetype that haunts you can become a source of strength if you can learn to separate what's hers from what's yours. That's the work. Not to fix her, not even to forgive her, but to reclaim yourself from the image you've been trapped inside. So how did you end up trapped in the first place? That's where Alice Miller's research comes in, and it reveals the mechanism behind the false mask. Alice Miller studied what she called the gifted child, and she didn't mean talented. She meant the child who learned to read their mother's moods, needs, and unspoken wounds with terrifying accuracy. The child who became a mirror, who was gifted with the idea that love wasn't about being seen for who you were, but about reflecting back what the parent needed in that moment. You were gifted with a wound, as morbid as that sounds. You didn't know you were adapting at the expense to yourself. You were just trying to survive. But somewhere along the way, you buried your real feelings, the anger, the sadness, the loneliness, because those feelings threatened the bond. You learned that being good meant being quiet, that love meant making yourself small, and over time, you forgot what you actually felt. You built what Miller called a false self, a version of you designed to be loved, while the real you suffocated in silence. Here's what makes it so hard to recognize. You probably looked fine. You might have been praised for being responsible, mature, obedient. You might have succeeded in school, at work, in relationships. But inside, you felt dead, empty. Like no matter what you achieved, it never filled the hole. That's because achievements can't replace being seen, symbols can't substitute for safety, and the applause you chased was never really for you. It was for the performance, for the false mask you built. Miller describes this dynamic as a kind of emotional exploitation. Your parent, who was also once a wounded child, unconsciously used you to feel loved, important, or safe. They didn't mean to harm you, but they couldn't see you as separate. They needed your reflection to survive. And you, desperate to be loved, gave it. You became their therapist, their cheerleader, their reason to keep going. And the price was your own needs and wholeness. This is why so many adults describe their childhoods as happy, but show up to therapy feeling hollow. The memories don't match the feeling. That's because the neglect wasn't physical, it was emotional. You were fed, clothed, maybe even praised, but you were never allowed to be messy, needy, or inconvenient. And that absence of being seen as you are carved a wound deeper than any bruise. Miller calls this the drama of the gifted child, the person who shines on the outside while dying on the inside. And the longer you live this way, the harder it becomes to remember who you were before you learn to perform. Your real feelings get stored in the body: tight shoulders, chronic pain, migraines, exhaustion. The body doesn't lie. It keeps the score until you are ready to listen and then release. Depression often surfaces when the false self cracks. Maybe you get sick, lose a job, or hit an age where performance stops working. Suddenly, the emptiness rushes in. Miller says this is a messenger, not failure. Your psyche is finally saying, stop pretending. Stop buying love with brilliance. Stop abandoning yourself. And while it feels unbearable, it's also the beginning. Because you can't heal what you can't feel. And feeling, really feeling, is the door back to yourself. The wound didn't start with you, and it won't end with you unless you make it conscious. That's where Jung's final insight becomes urgent. Jung believed the greatest burden a child carries is the unlived life of their parents, the dreams they abandoned, the rage they swallowed, the grief they never mourned. All of it gets passed down like an invisible inheritance. And unless you make it conscious, you'll hand it to your children too, or bury it so deep inside yourself that it rots into bitterness, addiction, or despair. A story that often ends tragically. Breaking the cycle doesn't mean confronting your physical mother. It means confronting the mother inside you. That voice that says you're not enough. The one that demands perfection, punishes mistakes, and withdraws love when you stumble. That voice isn't you. It's the echo of a wound that predates your birth. And the only way to silence it is to turn toward it, name it, and accept it without obeying it. In the book, Symbols of Transformation, Jung used the image of the hero descending into the underworld. The descent feels like death, facing memories, shame, terror you've spent your life avoiding. But on the other side of that descent is freedom. Not because the past changes, but because your relationship to it does. You stop being ruled by it. You stop believing the story that you're broken, unworthy, or too much. You see the wound for what it is. A pattern, not a truth. This is what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating what you've rejected. These rejected parts are unique to you. They could be anger you were taught to hide, the boisterous personality you were shamed for, the softness you covered with hard work and coldness. These aren't flaws. They're pieces of you that got exiled because they didn't fit the family script. And reclaiming them doesn't make you selfish or bad. It makes you human. This is your life, no one else's. Miller adds a crucial point. You can't think your way out of this. Insight alone won't heal you. You have to feel the feelings you were never allowed to feel. You have to rage at the injustice of being a child who had no choice. You have to grieve the mother you needed and never had. And you have to do it without making excuses for her, without minimizing, without rushing to forgiveness. Not because she's a monster, but because your healing requires the truth. Full, on the floor, crying, truth, if needed. The truth is often more real. She did the best she could with what she had, and it wasn't enough. Both can be true. Holding both is how you stop the cycle. You stop demanding that she finally see you. You stop waiting for her to apologize. You become the parent you needed for yourself. You mirror your own feelings. You soothe your own terror. You tell the child inside you, you didn't deserve that. You were never too much, and you're not alone anymore. Jung warned that without this work, the mother wound becomes a gravitational pull. You'll choose partners who recreate the dynamic. You'll sacrifice yourself for people who can't see you. You'll live in service to a ghost. But when you do the work, when you reclaim your projections, set boundaries, and refuse to abandon yourself, the archetype transforms. The mother inside you stops being a judge and becomes a source, not of comfort, but of creativity, of life. of your own authority. The wound isn't erased, but it stops running your life. You evolve past the narrative. Now, let us look at a practical tool you can start today. So, where do we begin? Start with these 3 simple steps. First, write a letter to your mother that you'll never send. Pour out everything: the rage, the longing, the grief, the blame. Don't edit. Don't soften. Let the child in you speak without apology. This isn't about fairness. It's about giving voice to what's been silenced. Bring everything up, as far as you are comfortable with. Next, when you're done, read it aloud. Notice what you feel in your body. Notice which emotions you want to dismiss or justify away. Those are the ones you've been taught to reject in yourself. Write them down. I reject my anger. I reject my sadness. I reject my need. Now ask, what would it mean to let myself feel these things? Not forever, just for today. Finally, practice one act of self-mothering. Maybe it's saying no to a demand that requires you to betray yourself. Maybe it's letting yourself rest without the expectation of having to earn it. Maybe it's speaking kindly to yourself after a mistake. You didn't get to choose your mother, but you get to choose now. And every time you choose yourself, you weaken the old pattern. You become the parent you needed, and that's how the cycle breaks, bit by bit. The mother wound you've inherited isn't your fault. You didn't create it, but you're the only one who can heal it and stop the cycle. Not by fixing your mother, not by becoming perfect yourself, but by refusing to abandon yourself the way you were once abandoned. By feeling what you were never allowed to feel. By building, brick by brick, the inner mother who sees you, holds you, and tells you the truth. You were never the problem. You were always enough. You just needed someone to notice. And now, finally, that someone is you. Thank you for joining me on this exploration into the mother wound. If this resonated, please share your reflections in the comments below and subscribe for more journeys into the depths of practical psychology, philosophy, and personal development. Until next time.